Yeah. People really send through the questions at the last minute. I have not been able to look through them yet.
Any trivia questions about who was the 10th Prime Minister of Australia? Or?
Oh, not quite. They're all really, really deep questions. I don't know which one to go for.
All of them.
There we go. The first one is test. Thank you for testing the system. You have been tested and received. Thank you very much. I'm just going to see if there's any flyers. I just juggled two phones at the same time. Here we go. No, that's fine. I've got this. I'm sure I've got this. All right. Now, I really love that there were certain themes that appeared in both of the conversations, the talks. And one of the things that I heard a fair bit about was the using of the word catastrophizing. Now, catastrophizing to me sounds like a bomb has gone off and everyone has died. Now, I understand that catastrophizing our thoughts doesn't look like a bomb has gone off in our head and our brain is bleeding. And it might be a catastrophized thought, but I think many of us don't recognize when we've had a catastrophizing moment. I don't even know if I'm using the word right. But how do we pick up when there's a thought that has gone perhaps towards that route of catastrophizing? How do we pick up that, no, that's not just good sense, that's not just being wise, that's not just being cautious, that's actually catastrophizing? Can either of you speak into that, or both of you speak into that for a moment?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to discuss that. So it's usually where your response is just totally irrational or disproportionate. So where it really makes no logical or rational sense, or something relatively minor results in a huge response of stress for you. So you might have a child who comes home and says, oh, this friend doesn't want to play with me anymore. I'm never going to be friends with them again. I'm never going to have any friends ever again for the rest of school. Now, we would look at that as an adult and think that's just irrational. Like, you'll have friends. Yeah. You'll work through this. But there are things where we as adults are just as irrational and disproportionate. So we'll start thinking things that are not realistic that's going to happen, or we'll have a really small issue that would cause some sort of stress, but this totally over-the-top response to that. So that's usually the things that I would identify as disproportionate and just really irrational and not logical. But when you're in the moment and it's going around in your mind, it's very hard to determine that sometimes. Yeah. And that's why voicing it with someone else is a very good way of someone shining a light and reflecting back to you to say, hold on, that doesn't make a lot of sense here. Let's just think about this rationally. But in our own mind, it's very hard to be rational when the thought has got a long way away from us.
Ali, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm with catastrophizing too, and what Adrian was saying about the thought going around and round. That creates rumination. That's it, rumination. And you need that circuit breaker by speaking about it to bring that. And one of the indicators that you would feel in your body for catastrophizing thoughts is that sense of overwhelmingness. Right. That would come, and that sense of you can't think of anything else that is so present in your mind that is actually all you're thinking about.
Fantastic. So just to build on that, if we want to help someone, we're talking about community and support and listening to one another. If we pick up that someone has a catastrophizing pattern, I would kind of see it as, if I'm letting them know about that, they sometimes can bite my head off because they're like, no, but this is the reality and this is how the world works, and if you just stop me from thinking like that, things are gonna go bad. How do we as a community come alongside people that might be catastrophizing?
For me, in my workplace, the first thing I would do is acknowledge them. No matter how extreme the thought process or the conversation appears for them, acknowledge them. And acknowledge what they're saying, because it's very real for them in that moment. Acknowledge everything that thought process embraces.
What does it actually look like, acknowledgement?
So acknowledgement would be, I can see that this is at the moment very important to you, and that you're focusing a lot of your time on this issue for you. Right. And I acknowledge that it's consuming, and the pain that it's creating and the confusion that it may be creating for yourself. So acknowledging, that's the first point that I would do.
Yeah.
And then the second element that I would add to that is, well, let's talk about why it has that huge impact on you. So that's a form of confrontation.
Right.
So what does that look like? Why has that triggered in you such a response of such grandiose expectation?
Right.
And then the third thing I would work with them is resolution. So now you've acknowledged, you've confronted what's actually going on, and then you walk towards resolution, and that would look like, what does the resolution look like for you? Because it's not about us, it's about the person that's in front of us. And because we're individually and uniquely made, we all have different understandings, expectations.
Yeah.
So speaking with them about, what does resolution look like for you? And is it now a time or a place that you want to move into that resolutionary stage or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think quite similar lines to that. Certainly, if I'm talking to someone who is experiencing anxiety, depression, and is catastrophizing things in their mind, so I have a classic example. I'd have men who'd say to me, "Look, I'm just really feeling down, being quite anxious about things, and I think I'm just, letting my wife down and letting my kids down. I'm not going to be a very good dad or a very good husband, and this is just what my life's going to be like." Instead of me saying, "Gee, you're being really over the top. That's just ridiculous," I'll say, as Ali said, look, I'm really feeling for you to hear that. But then I will reflect back and ask questions. I'll say, okay, so you've been feeling down for the last 4 or 5 weeks because this has been going on. And how's that making you feel? And so I say, so you think because of that, it means that for the next 20 years you won't be a good father. Let's talk about that. How do you make that jump? And then I'll say, but isn't it the case that you do this with your kids and your kids really like this? So I'm just, can you help me understand why you believe that when this is what I'm seeing?
Yeah.
And so I'm not trying to solve them. I'm just politely inquiring and saying, but you've got all these things doing, you've got some strategies to go over that. And as Ali said, so if you're thinking about that, couldn't you do this as a way around it? So I'm not trying to solve it or be a psychologist, but often just reflecting back to someone and asking questions and saying, oh, so you think this is, then it assists people to work through in their own mind. Because absolutely, saying to someone, "No, look, you're being ridiculous, pull your head in," that's not going to be effective for anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. On our own responsibility, I'm hearing a lot about self-awareness, whether it's, examining and evaluating, how am I self-caring or my thought processes. How do we develop greater self-awareness? Are there any practical tips you can give us?
I think the fact that you have brought it to your attention, your awareness increases every day. And so the fact that you're having these scenarios and, things like Blue Tree and those visual triggers that we have in our communities, the Are You OK days, even though they're only once a year, but they're there to create the normalcy of our awareness for self.
Yeah.
And the biggest question you can ask yourself is, am I okay? And then ask, are you okay? And be reflective on that. But it starts with your awareness and intentional. It's an intention that you work with.
Yeah. I think for some people, I think myself, I'm fairly aware and I talk very openly with my wife about my own, how I'm feeling. But for some people, they need to literally log on to an app. Like there's lots of apps where you might think, well, I'm at the point I need to start this. So every day I'm going to get an app sent to me. And I'm going to say, 10 questions, how am I feeling? A score out of 10, because that's what I need to do to be really aware. And then I can look at it over 3 months and say, because some people literally, they will say, they don't realise they've been down for 6 or 9 months. They've just got really low awareness, and that's okay.
Yeah.
They just need to start at a point. So I would encourage for those here today who have no idea where to start, there are lots of online apps where it sends you a questionnaire every day and you can answer it, and that's a way of prompting you to, I need to stop. At 9 o'clock every day, I get this app sent to me and I have to stop and think, how am I feeling today? How was my sleep last night? How has my nutrition been? Am I feeling down? Am I feeling happy? So that's, for some people, the most appropriate thing.
Yeah, so you just go to Google and go self-awareness app.
Look, when I get into work tomorrow, I'll send some
great.
things through to you. There are lots and lots of things out there.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that we had a couple of people address this issue in different ways, but maybe the young families, FIFO workers, but people that are away from community. And we've talked a lot about community, friendships being really important. For people that have a lifestyle, for whatever reason, that takes them away from community, what are some ways, practical ways that they could start to, or find that to build that community, even though they might be, they've got a 2-month-old bub that requires oldest time, or FIFO, you're away from family as well. Any tips and ideas on that?
Because you may be physically away from your family doesn't mean you're disconnected. And with FIFO workers, particularly with small children, I encourage them still to have family dinner night. Put the laptop on, Skype in, Zoom in, have your face there. Because what happens particularly with FIFO workers is that when they come home, they haven't got the history of the 2 weeks away of conversations. And so they're trying to jump into the family conversations, yet they're feeling like their sense of belonging has been displaced. So if they're there at the dinner table, even though it's on the laptop or in the bathroom when you're bathing the lilies, having them there, still having them present, they're still hearing Dad's voice, they can still see the activities in the home. That's one of the things, because it bridges that, it narrows the bridge of that gap for when they do come back into the family home. And so FIFO families are in a constant element of change. So with a FIFO family, you have the family over here, and everyone's doing what they need to do for the benefit of the family, whoever's the caregiver at home and running the household, and the FIFO worker going away. And every time that FIFO worker comes back to the home, they're piercing each other's bubbles. And that constant change is happening. And then again, it happens after the R&R time. And it's constantly doing this reconnection. And that's a real and difficult thing that is present, and that affects the sense of belonging, is because they no longer feel they belong in the family. And it's the familiarity.
I think also people often say, I don't have time. And it's interesting if we look at screen time, for example, when we say we don't have time, that's a challenge for us to think how we're spending our time. But we need to be really planned in what we do. So the way that works in my family, my wife goes to the gym and has like a functional fitness gym and has friends there. And we know on our calendar, I can tell you over the next month, because my hours are quite long and kind of lots of nights out with work. But I know I will be training on this Tuesday, 4 o'clock, I'll be training the under 10s teams, and then I'll do my training after that. I can tell you which days I'll be going swimming and which days my wife will go to the gym. For us, that's what is really important. And I know that I'll come Thursday night during winter and I'll go and play indoor cricket every Thursday. Even if I'm feeling worn out, I just get up and do it. Now, it's totally different things for other people of what's important for your mental health. But the thing is, unless you're planned, and for our family, it works having it written up on the calendar, but you need to say, if this is what you need, if it's walking or a community group, you need to have a plan and say, I'm working my week around, I'm going to be there. Because if you just leave it to chance, it's probably not going to happen. Yeah.
It's that intention.
Yeah. What if people have this sense of like, I want to do that, but I really, really can't afford to, for whatever reason? That's something that I've come across where people's like, I want to be better at, being involved in church, for example, but right now, I've got all of these things that I need to do, and I really want to, but I can't. So there's this idea of can't involved in the thought process. Any tips on maybe getting around that?
I mean, we are really good at putting up barriers, and it's hard, without knowing the specifics of people, but I hear so many barriers of people, well, I can't do this, and, I can't go and do further study now. Like with Ali's story, I'm sure when you had kids, lots of people would say, well, I can't do study, I've got kids. I mean, it'd be hectic looking after kids, but I think a lot of it's a frame of mind, and it's often a barrier people put up and say, oh, well, I can't do that, because some people are really afraid of failing. So the easiest thing is to say, well, it's not possible for me to do that because it's just too busy, or I can't possibly do that because you don't have to try, then you can't fail if you haven't tried. So that's what I often think is it's a lot of barriers, because I know other people who recklessly take things on. Just think, oh, I can do that. I'll just keep trying all sorts of things, and a lot of it is a mindset. So often when people I talk to say, look, I can't do that, I'll say, okay, let's talk about that. What is it exactly? So what would it look like? Because often we need to look for a way in rather than a way out. So it's a lot easier to say, really good. I can't do this because of this and this. So that's what I often say to people is to say, so you're looking for a way out. Let's look for a way in. And I'm not asking them to commit straight away. I'm just saying, you're telling me what it looks like with you not doing it. Let's just talk about what it would look like you doing it. And you don't have to commit to it, but say, well, this is what it could look like. Yep. But often people just shut it out. I'm just looking for a way out. Too busy, can't do it, too hard.
Yep.
3 years' time I'll do that, 5 years' time I'll do that. That's never going to come.
Yeah. So it almost is kind of helping them to process because they don't maybe naturally process. They already see the barriers. I guess all of us see barriers really easily. So it's kind of getting past that by kind of taking a different point of view without the commitment at the start and then working through that.
I would talk to them about the importance of it as well, because our lives are like real estate. Sometimes we need to vacate some of our properties to create space. And you know, and if it's really important, it's really important to you. It's amazing how quickly we can create vacancies. Yeah. So, but also if it's not important to them, release some of that. That's okay that it's not important to you, because that could change.
Yeah, yeah. Now, a bit of a fun question. Someone was saying that retail therapy is their self-care method.
Absolutely.
How do you know that that's not going to become another addiction? How do you make sure you don't get to that place? I'm speaking on behalf of all husbands out there.
I would put retail therapy as self-comfort. So that's what I would do. But I suppose anything that causes harm to self and to others and something that you don't have control over, something that is a driver, that is a compulsion, is an addiction in a sense. But if you know you're going out, I used to, with two of my girlfriends, it was almost a little bit of a game. We'd take $100 out, who could buy the most of the stuff we need, and who came home with the most bags. And it was just, we went out with a list of what we needed first. That was the key thing. There was no wants in there. So, and we made a day of it, and it was fun. And so, yeah, it's the compulsion and the lack of ability to manage it and the overwhelmingness and the driver that it is in your life.
Yeah. I think there is a certain sense, and maybe that's what our culture tells us, but sometimes it feels like self-care can look really expensive. Is that the case?
Sitting in silence is free. Looking at nature is free. Listening to music, depends on your forum in which you're doing it, is free. And we all eat, so it's what you're eating. Yes, it can be expensive if you chose expensive items for your self-care, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, sometimes it's just stepping out of the stress and the pressure. So for me, I might just go, I live in Kalamunda and there's lots of mountain bike trails, and I might just finish work slightly early and just go for a ride for an hour or so just by myself. And for me, getting out into nature is really important. I know that's a really common thing for lots of people, and living in Kalamunda is quite convenient for me, but it doesn't cost me anything to go for a ride 2Ks from my house just in the bushland, and I re-energise and revitalise like that. So I think there's lots of ways that don't cost anything. It's just about, I think, what Ali mentioned, sometimes people feel it's selfish because I've got a busy job and 3 kids and lots of things, and I feel like I'm being selfish by saying, no, I'm just going to spend 2 hours by myself with my phone switched off, but I need to prioritise myself. And there's nothing wrong with putting yourself first for a while to say, because I'm no good to anybody if I'm totally stressed out and not in a good space.
What happens for people with self-care and they stress out about self-care?
It can be overwhelming. Seriously, it can be overwhelming, because it is something that we're all made aware of, and we all know when we've had a really bad eating day, we've eaten too much or too often or whatever, because we feel poorly in our bodies. And we all know when we're not exercising as we should, we all feel that in our bodies. And it can stress us out, but that's the whole thing about self-care. It is a journey, and it is malleable, it's changeable, and you never arrive.
All right, well, our time's nearly up. So can I just get both of you to give one last tip? We've heard the conversations, been a part of this morning. What is one quick tip that you give to all of us for boosting our mental health?
Probably the one I'd say is a really important one is, in churches is often for us to think, if I'm experiencing mental health and it hasn't been healed, it's a lack of faith. And that is not the case at all. Paul was in prison, and he said, this would be my deliverance. He didn't leave the prison. He was tortured. He died. But for him, and when you look at the Greek writings of it, his deliverance was in his trial and struggle, as Shane Willard says, keeping his hands clean, his heart pure, and his head held high.
Yeah.
And just because Christ says he'll deliver us of things doesn't mean he'll solve things and take things away. And I would really encourage people in that if someone has arthritis, or as I said before, like diabetes, no one would say, well, that's a lack of faith. But for some reason in Christian circles, we think, well, if I'm experiencing mental health, it's because I've got unaddressed sin, or I don't have enough faith, or I'm not living a good enough life. That is not the case at all. That is not supported in any scripture whatsoever. So I'd really encourage you that if you are experiencing difficulties with mental distress, that's normal. Like it's a common human experience, and you could be living with mental health issues your whole life, and that is no reflection whatsoever in the amount of faith you have or the life you are leading, or it's not a lack of prayer and fasting because you're living with depression.
Yeah.
It's just a fact of life. It's just what you may be experiencing.
Mine would be kind to yourself and to others, always.
Fantastic. Why don't we thank our two guests this morning? I hope that you really enjoyed it. So get on.